Let's kick off by a very simple question where normally people give very, very long answers. And I would like to answer you with yes or no. Does Google decide on the fate, or can Google decide on the fate of companies? Are they the ones who can say this one is going to be successful or this one is not?
One word? No.
It depends.
Yes.
I agree, it depends.
So we have 1 no, 1 yes, and 2 maybe, which is very interesting, especially as these gentlemen are making money by actually manipulating Google or playing along the rules. So let's find out a little bit more why these gentlemen came to the answers they gave us by understanding what their products do. And gentlemen, let me tell you one thing. We're doing NOAH. We get probably per day around 50 to 100 requests. And we have picked those 4 gentlemen to talk about SEO and SEM, how to be successful on Google. So if someone knows how to play the Google game and become successful on the internet, those 4 companies, we believe, are the best ones to talk to. So tell us what your products do and how your customers, through your products, are becoming successful. And this time you can say more than 1 word. You can say 2 sentences.
Thank you, 2 sentences. Marin Software is an online advertising management platform, traditionally coming from the paid search environment, but also takes into account social and display as well now. Really what we do on behalf of our advertisers is help them understand the value of the various channels that they're advertising in. Google being one of those, but then also others such as Yahoo, Bing, Facebook, Criteo, and other suppliers like that. And they're able to understand the value, visualize the data, and then take action based on the results that they see.
Rankabove is a Israel and New York-based startup. We focus on software as a service for organic search or SEO. We manage very large campaigns for some of the biggest websites in the world. We focus on significant scale, millions of keywords, millions and hundreds of millions of page websites, and we have a way to take unstructured data from those websites and how to structure it into prioritized, manageable results that you can then go ahead and implement on your website for better search ranking, better traffic, higher conversions, and more money.
Yeah, Searchmetrics is also a startup based in Berlin. We started in SEO, and we also are a software as a service company, so you can make everything online. And what we have is we have a database based on SEO and social, so you can analyze proactively the performance and the success of your site, of every site in the world. It's a huge database, and yeah, we're in the market since 4 years.
Well, Xamine is mainly focused in the SA market. We're doing competitive intelligence, we're doing market intelligence, and the advantage for our customers is clearly if you can identify best practice strategies for your competitors, you could learn from the best, you could make less mistakes, and you could increase your revenues.
So I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm not that much smarter. By having talked to you 4 before and learned about your products and businesses, I realized that you have partially actually rebuilt Google technology in order to help your customers, which I find highly impressive because you obviously have much less capital there. We probably don't understand how to be successful. We know that with your products, companies are successful. That's why you're nicely growing businesses. Congratulations on that. Tell us what the don'ts are. So the do's on Google, we probably won't understand because it's your magic black box and people can't copy it. That's why you're successful. But tell us a little bit, and that's easier to grasp today, and that's really the benefit for the audience. What should you not do when you will be highly ranked on Google?
from a paid search angle, I think one of the core things that a lot of advertisers forget about is that they focus on the equations and the bid prices and other things around that, and tend to forget that they're actually communicating with humans on the other end. So as far as forgetting about the relevancy and running compelling ads and other things around that, our customers tend to do more of that because we allow them to spend less time on the heavy lifting and of the technical infrastructure side. So I think that's one of the key things, is that don't just think it's a simple mathematical equation to success. And I also, the other thing as well is that don't think of Google as just keywords. There are multiple parts to it as well. And I think that you need to look at all things across, obviously the main thing being the different platforms, is that obviously Google is not only a desktop solution, is that many of you will be on iPads right now, and also through mobile, which are all very different in their own right. So therefore, Google is many things. It's not just one search engine.
So Google, as Ed started discussing, actually has many different aspects. You have Google Places, you have Google Video, Google Images, universal search, multilingual search. There are a lot of different aspects to it. And in order to manage that appropriately within very large websites is nearly impossible by hand these days. What a lot of companies decided to do was content aggregation and serving up old stale content found on other sites and displaying it in a new, unique way, thereby driving AdSense traffic, or AdSense revenue to their websites, trying to build businesses off of that. I think Google, in their Panda release that came out in May, and then rolled out several times over the past 6 months or so, has proven to us that it's not necessarily a viable business model. Google has also changed what used to work in search, where everybody was focused on link acquisition, with an update they made on Thursday, which is now their freshness algorithm, I believe is what they're calling it. It used to be called Caffeine, which now affects 35% of all searches, which now actually brings it back to SEO fundamentals, focusing on on-page SEO, creating good, fresh content that's good for you users, because at the end of the day, it's not about fooling search engines, it's about making more money. And the money is made based on creating a better user experience for your visitors. And I actually equate great SEO with great user experience. It's easy to navigate, it's easy to find content, and therefore if it's easy for Google to find that content, it's most likely easy for your users to find that content as well. So it's actually about creating wonderful websites people enjoy going to, people like reading, and that content is always fresh and relevant.
Thanks. Yeah, to have my opinion on that, create the content for the user, not for the search engine. This is the thing you have to think about. If you create, or if your business model is only based on creating content for search engines to obviously cheat, to make content for one query in 50 different variations, then you can't win. The Panda update, which was rolled out at the end of February this year, and in different iteration steps, that makes sure that Google wants to have the content that the user wants. So the user signals are really, really important. So if you don't have likes or shares, or if the time on site is really less, if the bounce rate is really high, and the user doesn't like your site, then you can make your link building campaigns on and on and on, but you never can rank anymore. And this is what Google is doing. And that's the don't think that you have the best optimized website. Think about the user. And this is the way Google changed this year. So 2011 was the year where Google really changed the algorithm at most.
In addition to what Marcus already said, my recommendation would be don't over-exaggerate your optimization. If you're using what is basically called black hat technologies, Google might put you easily out of the market. The second thing which I would recommend is Don't look at Google just as a search engine. Google is the way that brings traffic to your website. But there is more than just the search engine. There is YouTube, there are other channels. And if you just focus on the SEO part, for example, and Google is doing an update like Panda before, and you're not into SEA, you're not into other channels, it might ruin your business from one day to the other.
Just to add one more thing, if you want to see the impact of the Google Freshness update from last week, you know, Google said, hey, it's 35%, it's a huge update, it's more than 1/3 of every query. It wasn't really a huge update. So the Panda was a much bigger update, and you can go on TechCrunch or on your blog. We made an analysis, and you see that only some sites won and some lost. So it's more the typical everflux in the Google index.
Thank you very much. We learned that to be successful, you have to have an indirect strategy. You have to focus on the users, and you have to look at Google as a differentiated place and not as a kind of one-trick pony. A one-trick pony, it certainly is when it is talking about revenue generation. It's pretty much all coming through search, and it's probably an online advertising market share, probably a 50% plus. Now, if you look at, and this is a question to the SEM players on the panel, if you look at Google kind of in 10 years, they're clearly trying to move the SEO traffic to SEM with all their algo updates and trying to get more money out of the advertisers. And Google is becoming more and more expensive. And we do know from our clients that acquiring customers at some stage is not profitable even for the first few quarters. And at some stage it will break profitable, which clearly is a fantastic business. My question to you is, looking at CPC prices and competing channels to acquire customers, i.e. vertical search, lead gen businesses, is Softonic in software, is Trivago in travel, Uswitch in utilities, you name them, they are extremely inexpensive compared to Google CPC prices. Is that something which would keep the Google founders up at night?
Well, I think the first thing is that obviously CPC inflation is something that keeps advertisers up at night. But to that, I think that just to generally accept the fact that that is the way forward and that things are just going to keep on going until we reach a point of diminishing returns, I think that there's an awful lot that can still be done on that. For example, just recently in the most recent quarter, Google announced that average CPCs went up by around about 5%. We did the same benchmarking across our customers, and over the same period, they actually had a reduction of CPC of 18% over the same period, like for like. So there's an awful lot that can still be done to reduce down what you're doing, just basically around just doing better practices and better best practices around this. It is a one-trick pony, but it's a very big one. So obviously, you can get other channels and other publishers to be able to give you some incremental revenue. But obviously, you know, to have a very good and profitable campaign on Google is where you're going to get the volumes from.
Okay, talking about CPC prices are not stable at all. We did a test mid of this year, and we were calculating from January to April, and we found keywords which rose about 20% and other keywords rose about 400%. What's the reason for that? Google is getting more and more advertisers. Those advertisers are competing, so even increasing the prices further. In addition to that, I think there are more cost-efficient ways to get advertisement instead just focusing on Google and paying the high CPCs.
I give you my experience about dealing with Google. When we started NOAH, we had a website for our conference, and it was kind of on page 8, hardly to be found. We added your names on the website, the participants, and suddenly after 1-2 years, actually 3 years now, you enter NOAH, and our ranking went up. So I do know, and this was a very much user-focused strategy because I wanted you to know who of your colleagues, friends, and potential clients are coming to NOAH, had a very positive impact on NOAH's visibility on the net. Now tell me, if you look at SEO, and when we sell companies which are old, and in the internet world, old means over 10 years old, we invented this term SEO real estate. How much advantage do sites have which are simply old versus new sites? And as a second part of the question, what can you do to improve the SEO ranking? Maya.
So I think it really depends on the freshness of content. I think old stale sites nobody's interested in reading anymore. I think it also depends on, if we can look at the search market or at the market and divide it into verticals. We basically have e-commerce and we have content sites. I think Google looks at each one of those sites differently, and based on the updates they've been making, treats those differently as well. So if you look at the freshness algorithm, or if you look at Panda, companies or websites that actually heavily featured video and images did very, very well in terms of rise in traffic from their video pages, from their image pages, assuming that they actually played nicely with the update back in May with Google image algorithm change. So as you can see, there are a lot of different moving parts to all of it, and just doing it by hand doesn't work anymore. But when you go back to the freshness update, you have to look at Google's motivations. Google has a way to make money on every single website and every single vertical, right? Google will make money on the content players because they're probably using, DoubleClick's Dart, or now it's called Dart for advertisers through display advertising, or they're probably hosting AdSense on their website, so they're making money on those. So by Google creating this new freshness algorithm update that affects 35% of search, you have these websites now that are heavily, rich in video, images, and fresh content. Those are going to start bubbling up to the top of the results, thereby pushing down e-commerce, which typically are more fixed products and a little bit more stale in their content. Because if you sell cameras, how many new cameras are you adding to the market on a regular basis? How many new reviews are really being written on these on major websites that have high authority? So Google is able to actually increase or at least drive greater demand to the paid search part for those e-commerce players, and they figured out a way to make money on everybody from every single search query in a very efficient manner. So I think Google's possibly one of the smartest companies in the world. They fool us by saying that these algorithm changes are better for the user, but if you actually look at the prime motivation behind what Google does, it's always to raise revenue. So when I take an approach to Google, I always look to see how one might balance the other. And the other thing that Google actually did in the freshness update is basically say that if you run a site where no transactions take place on your site, right, you're an affiliate site, right, you're not going to succeed in search anymore. You might as well find a new business model. And that's pretty significant for a lot of the lead gen businesses, for a lot of businesses that basically redirect traffic to Amazon, Best Buy, or any other e-commerce site in the world.
Thanks, Mayor. One thing I can't agree with you is that Google is looking at the revenues and take advantage in ranking sites that use AdSense or double-click ads and so on, rank them higher, because Google is a technology-driven company. Google wants to give the user the best search experience. Google never says that a business model is crap. So look at the Panda update, some price comparison websites, they really lost traffic, but other price comparison websites that won traffic. So you have the Chaos and Kelkus on the one hand, they lost, and the Idealos in Germany especially, they really won traffic. And the reason is not that Google says, okay, one price comparison is the best for the user, because the brand is important, the search experience, and this is what Google is doing. They always want to try to make the best algorithm to give the user really, really the best result. It's not the salesperson in the company that says, okay, Demand Media is an example. Sean is here, I think. They are one of the biggest player in AdSense, and they got hit after Panda because they have some contents that are duplicate that are created only for search engines, not for the user. And this is what Google is doing. They don't think, okay, I will maximize my revenues, and the user is important. And that's really cool. And they don't, they don't think that they manipulate the SERPs only for the revenues.
So don't misunderstand me. I think they're looking to improve the results, right? But when you have two different kinds of results or different kinds of websites that can come up, you're going to still make money on anything in terms of driving, you know, those quality websites to the top, because Google will make money whether they drive traffic to demand media sites or they drive it to somebody else's site, right? So they're still going to look for that good quality content to come up to the top, but their motivation is still revenue based. I don't think the CEO of Google thinks about how can I create the greatest user experience and let my stock price crash on Wall Street.
Just to add one more thing, one of the winners after the freshness updates were the universities. All the universities, and we analyzed 50 of them, they won after the freshness update, and they don't have AdSense or something else on the site, because it's the content that is really interesting. I know that Google is interested in making money, and the revenues, you see it quarter by quarter, is increasing, but in the end, the user is the one who decides who's ranking good or not.
May I answer on that one, cynical? I think Google is the largest recruiting firm as well out of universities. Now, there's great disagreement, and we love disagreement, because disagreement leads to one thing. You need to be advised on how you deal with Google. There's no answer which is right or wrong. It's complex. But we, from our point of view, we know that companies who work with you tend to be more successful than others. But what puzzles me, and this is the last question for the panel, and this is one of those where I don't want you to make long answers. What puzzles us that we could have a client who is extremely successful, who hardly spends any money on Google. And then you have a customer who is spending a lot of money on Google, and it doesn't really work. Now, to your products, of course, if you use yours, it's going to work. But give the audience an idea on 3 numbers. You're an e-commerce startup. How much money in percent of your first year revenues you should spend in percent of marketing? Number 2, you're an established e-commerce company. Let's use Amazon, and I'm surprised to hear Amazon is getting around, I hear 30% of their revenues through SEM, which is astonishing. And lastly, if you look at the split of SEO and SEM, and you might be a little bit biased here, what should that split be? And when I saw your face right now, we are not going to get a number.
Yeah, I think as far as a number, I think that more maybe from a paid search perspective, because what you're looking at is an always-on strategy, where really what you're looking for is a model where you can keep going when it's successful. And what you want to do is tweak your expectations of ROI as opposed to have a set percentage of your startup capital or whichever heading towards that. So what you're really seeking is really a scalable approach to what you're doing. So just make sure that everything's in line to be able to keep going when it's successful, but then to be able to flex in and out from that.
I'm not quite sure what that number would be, but I believe that there are many companies that will do one search strategy over the other, which I personally think is a mistake. I think if you're a startup looking to build your actual web application, your website, your e-commerce platform, thinking about the way you actually structure dynamic pages and the way pages are created out of your database is extremely important. It's a sort of thing that you can actually save problems down the line by doing things right and forcing each page to be created in an optimized way for Google from the get-go. So I think it's extremely important to actually not make it a marketing discipline, but making it an IT discipline within the organization. Instead of going after things just aren't working, making it part of your actual IT culture to do things right. And then I'm obviously a huge supporter. I actually work pretty closely with Marin. You know, we work on many customers together. We're big supporters of paid search because The reason that you would go to a Starbucks instead of Mike's Coffee Place, say in New York, is because Starbucks owns that real estate. Starbucks done a better job branding itself and owning that block. So if you're doing one and not the other, you're probably losing. It's a zero-sum game, right? There are 20 results per page. You need to decide whether you're going to be there or not. And if you're not there, somebody else is going to take that. And I know it's more than 20 results these days, but you know, that's the classic Google for you.
Okay, you said the magic word, branding. So Starbucks made a good job in that market. So this is, I don't have a ratio how much money you have to spend in SEO, SEM in terms of your whole budget, but really important is that you have a good branding, that you use the money in marketing to make good SEO and SEM campaigns to build a brand. You know, if you only spend money on general terms, on making traffic, and then you will lose the game. If you look at companies like Zalando in Germany, they really made a good job in branding, and they spent really a lot of money in TV campaigns, in online campaigns, in everything. And now the search volume only on the brand itself, on Zalando, is about 1.8 million searches a month only for the brand. And this job they did in only 1.5 years. And that's why you have to spend a big ratio of your marketing money in that. But I think there's no answer how much it will be. It depends on your business, I think.
Okay, it's really difficult to give a fixed percentage of the budget you should invest into online marketing because there are mainly two cost factors. One is SEO, it's an ongoing process, and also SEO is a real maybe not the biggest, but a real cost factor. On the other hand, if you're good in SEO, you won't have so much spendings in SEA because people will come to your website. It always depends how much traffic you need to be successful. If you get the traffic from SEO, I would not just focus on SEO because if Google does a new update, you might be hurt. But there is a substantial amount of money that you have to invest into online marketing. My advice would be use different channels.
Well, it's time to say thank you. We're going to the next session. I can only encourage the audience to interact with those 4 companies because, again, we cover many businesses, and the ones who work with those 4 companies we have seen to be more successful on the Google front than others. And I say thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. They have been quite diverse and interesting. Thank you.